Hey, Reggie, what do you think of, I mean, you talked in your stuff about the Mind Calendar in 2012. Like, what do you think might happen? How do you, what part does it play in your personal cosmology?
Well, I'm not going to be in New York when it happens. I'm going to, I don't think a high population density area with, hyper dependence on grids and systems would be a good place to be. I mean, my thing is, like, it could happen, it could not happen. It could happen in a way that we would never expect it. It could happen in a way that we completely expect it. It's like, I don't know. I often joke and say, I call it spiritual Y2K. But I think that the evidence, is interesting and compelling. And I've read excerpts by yourself and other contemporaries, and I like the direction of the idea of an opportunity for consciousness change. And I do believe in the idea of magnetic signatures in the way that, like, when we're each born, the snapshot of the universe at that relative point is essentially a unique magnetic fingerprint. So that creates kind of a signature with tendencies, behavioral tendencies. But then consciousness can hopefully evolve above that and change the actual nature of the tendency or the default setting. So I think that, to me, what it represents is an opportunity for the human consciousness to kind of have, I view it as like you have a circle and you draw a line down the circle, but then if you like put an axis in the middle and then you kind of shift it and then you continue the lines from there, it turns into a spiral. So it moves onwards. And I think of that during that time, whether it's a subtle tiny shift in realization where we stop viewing ourselves as important in every aspect of our everyday lives and see things in a hyper interconnected way. I think that that could grow, even if it's just the smallest idea. So, I mean, my thing is I'm going to hang out in Iowa. No, the other I state, Idaho. No, but I'm going to hang out in Idaho with my friend Melanie, close to Montana, with all my friends. She has a property out there with a farm and everything that you would need.
A couple of years' food stored underneath.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, because, I don't know, why not? I mean, and if nothing happens, if something very subtle happens, whatever, it's cool to be at least with friends that you love, and kind of like, whoa, we did that. So, I mean, that's my plan.
Well, I mean, it's the winter solstice, which was, very important for the Mayan cosmology. And according to this work that John Major Jenkins did, and other scholars have kind of somewhat agreed with, there's the winter solstice sun has been approaching this point where it rises at the exact center of the dark rift at the center of the Milky Way, which is the center of our galaxy, which they talked about that as the Great Mother, and the sun was the first father. So it's a kind of a meeting up of the Great Mother and the first father on the solstice, which was for them like this most important day. So why would that have significance? Why would that have any type of effect on us on Earth? No reason that we know of.
It's funny, when I was a wee little lad, I always thought that I was always interested in the idea of simulation, to a certain degree. I didn't maybe think of it that way. I thought of it as like a dream state. But I always thought that life is so fishy all the time. Like there, if you notice, there are these correlations, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, it's almost like someone occasionally like peeking their head out and going, and going away, and you're like, what the fuck's going on? What's happening? Who? Where? But so I think of but I've always thought as a kid that there would be some way, or wouldn't it be fantastic if you just you came into another understanding of reality on a large collective level with many people, like that could be possible, and then you're like, oh right, that's what this was. That was awesome, guys. All right, this time I'm going deeper. Take me 2 notches down, or whatever, but it feels like it's an operating system, and the operating system has certain personal tendencies and so forth. And they're like, okay, well, let's see if these particular beings of consciousness, they should have conflict. That's really important. So we'll make them different, and they'll be like really different looking, and they'll be different looking, and they're going to hate each other based on that. And then as that evolves, it'll gain resolution. It'll be higher resolution. Hatred will be really refined hatred. But then people going, that's not cool, man, and then they're in another battle within a battle. I feel like the operating system is just about like conflict, and that's the distraction. It's just like, so if the opportunity comes where there's some type of a magnetic alignment, a gateway to shift the way that we think, or even something more fantastic than that, I think that's a welcomed. And almost like, oh, okay, that figures. I think it's more that than anything else for me.
How do you think people participate in this? Is it something that's just happening, or do people have to actually make something happen?
I think it's a very active process. I mean, I think it's lazy and kind of naive to think that anything changes by just doing nothing. And I mean, even visualizing takes something. So, I mean, it takes a lot to do nothing. But, I guess, no, I mean, it's active. I mean, you have to, understand your potential, understand the infinite potential that we all have. But we have, restrictions and limitations in a way that I feel are just kind of challenges. I think that consciousness comes as I'd like to think of it as an instant collective. It's like when you're jamming in music and you're just having this free, open improvisation, and it's kind of rough at first, and then suddenly you find this groove, and then you're in this groove and you're doing this repetitive thing, and you're not getting tired of it. You just find this little thing that you're doing, and you're not getting tired of it. It's amazing. It's always great, and it's essentially the same thing. And then everyone kind of locks into this pattern, and it all comes together, and then suddenly time starts to slow, and then you're able to see this pattern that you're a part of. And I think that is how I would imagine. Yeah. It's the work on self, education, talking with people, having meaningful conversations, and trying to be as sincere as possible.
Because there's that capacity for consciousness to radiate out through these kind of immaterial networks.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
So let's take this somewhere. We're talking about levels of consciousness, new realities, psychic abilities, and people here are looking at both beauty and also we seem to have a little discord. What would be your milestone, for change on a mass scale? How do you see change on a personal scale? When do you know you're opening something up?
Good question.
What do you look for?
I think
on a personal scale, it usually comes with shame. When somebody when something reveals to you, just what an asshole you've been, and how much your shadow that you thought you'd kept in a cubbyhole was actually just as raging as ever. And then finally somebody has confronted you on a level where you're ashamed enough that you have to then deal with it, until it finds the next little cubbyhole and the process starts again.
It's just one of those things it sounds stupid, but you just know it when you know it. It's the moment that you realize you're riding your bicycle without training wheels, or it's that moment that you jumped off of a high dive and you were afraid to do it, but you're past that point of no return and you're just heading towards the water. But these types of things, these realizations, I think we just know them when they happen to us. I think when we're looking, it feels as though we may not know if it happens, or we'd like to know when it does. But it's one of those things that's neither nor, neither, many.
I mean, on a global level, I tend to think it's going to be very extreme, that it's actually going to have to go to the Zapatistas have a slogan where they say everything for everyone, nothing for ourselves. That actually the resources of the earth have been very disproportionately shared, and if there was a shift to a more kind of consciousness paradigm where people valued immaterial, qualitative experience over material goods, then I think we would rectify that on a global scale.
Have you ever thought, speculation about this shift is obstacle, to your own person?
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like I'm talking and I'm listening, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah, well, that's what I like what he does, because it's kind of more about just like the frequency of thought rather than anything that's like, a tangible iteration of the concept. But you do need to think. I mean, but then the other argument is like we haven't really learned to think, so we actually don't even know what that would be like. That the Enlightenment philosophers tried to make people reason, but then our system is a propaganda system where consciousness is controlled by a giant indoctrination mechanism. So actually, we have to now go through the lumbering, cumbersome, unpleasant, attempt to learn how to think from basis. Again.
Like, what if someone reads your book and then they take your ideas and make them their own?
Cool. I mean, that's why you write a book, really. Sure. They can do whatever they want with them.
I mean, yeah, and ideas are shared experiences, and people have gifts to be able to channel them into a clear format, so that we're like, oh yes. But I also think this. I think that absurdity holds the key to surviving in reality. I think that seeing the universe as a silly place, and there are. It's not to not acknowledge the real consequences, but there is a way that you can view the world and reality in a healthy perspective. I always say, when in doubt, zoom out.
But I just want to make a counter proposal. I mean, I don't really know the answer, but I mean, for instance, I'm drinking, is this tap water, I assume? And people know about the fracking, the hydrofracking in New York. So basically, all of our water systems are being compromised, tampered, we're being, increasingly poisoned. So we'll go in, thousands now to take our pants off or to hit each other with lightsabers in the park, and I love all that stuff. But what are we going to do about this? Nobody seems to or there's a small group of slightly too solemn, environmental activists who people in mass don't really associate with because they're kind of holding too much pain and anguish for the collective, So what do we do to bridge that so actually we can take our pants off and clean this stuff up, Or don't we? Or maybe we prefer, as he said, that maybe we want to skate into the abyss. Maybe somehow that's one of the hypotheses that I've worked with in my ideas, is that maybe we're self-willing a total catastrophe on every level to force unconsciously to force a transmutation of human consciousness, because we can't, for whatever reason, do it consciously and coherently and in logical ways. I mean, in my book, I wrote about Jung's ideas around the archetypes, and it's they're obviously these archetypes exist, and then they constellate, So this archetype of the apocalypse and the Armageddon and the second coming, these are super deep, complexes in the individual and collective psyche. And yeah, it does seem like the Christians are, pulling on them. The question is, what do we do about it? I mean, somehow we have to supersede these organized religions, in some way. But obviously, you can't do that. You somehow have to find a way to communicate with those people, and it's almost like reverse anthropology or something. How would you go back and say to them, okay, well, why do you believe all this stuff in this old book? But then on the other hand, look, I mean, there's some maybe positives. That's probably all those churches and those communities is probably one of the only cohering forces in a lot of America. So it's if you could access what brings people together and then somehow cut off the negative ideology, maybe that would be a path to a positive change.
The thing is, those systems are, I mean, in a way, I like to view those systems as kind of irrelevant because the idea of thought and connected consciousness is kind of something beyond that. Those are kind of complex layers on top of something that's already connected, but there's the illusion of disconnection. Well, there's the history and the reinforcement and even the architecture that we exist in, or the way that we build things, or the way that doorways are shaped, or the way that cars are shaped, or the way that jackets button up and so forth. Those are all things that inform us, or local in time and space, our locale. But my inkling suspicion is that especially through physics, the world of physics is such an interesting place because it's far more fantastic than any religion can or science fiction writer can come up with. I mean, the things that they discover are things that make our world even more impossible to understand, as the person with the Nova ringtone will attest to. But you know, because I think of I think of it as essentially an operating system. Life is like a hard drive, and there's an operating system, and so it's all made of the same stuff. And hard drives work by just allocating digital information in different patterns in various locations, but they're spread throughout various locations, but they still represent one whole unit of an idea. But it's still made of the same information that the entire hard drive is made of. So it's the perception of the information that makes us either buy into the reality or forms the way that we relate to the
of
world.
course, the fact that you're using all the metaphors from computers shows how your own consciousness has been phenomenologically shaped by the digital technology.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, I think that we reproduce the ideas of what we are constantly, because we are no different. You know, there was like a time where I would look at a skyscraper and say, that's a man-made object, or a barrel of toxic waste, and say, that's unnatural. And it's just not. It's natural. Yeah, I mean, it's natural because it's made of all of the same exact ingredients that everything is made of. And so it's just a different formation of that.
But at that point, you've just collapsed distinction, and we still have to come up with a term that defines, I mean, like you could say nature and second nature or something like that.
Sure. I mean, what do you mean, explain that?
Well, I mean, because, yes, on one level, it's all natural. In fact, I like to look at the skyscrapers in New York. If you think about underneath the city, there being this incredibly hard granite with the ice age, the glaciers came to a stop here, and it's almost like they are like, stalactites, like the rocks have like pushed up, or something.
Right.
So yes, you could look at them as natural, but somehow when we discuss these things, we still need to be able to make distinctions.
Well, we're on this scale.
Yeah.
So we need to. Yeah. I mean, it's the only way to navigate. It's like everyone is looking at the entire picture through a straw. You don't have enough memory to actually hold the entire image of the map as it's being processed.
Yeah.
And so I think like we need things. We need to call things and have systems and say, hey, you're Sarah, right? You continue to be that particular formation of molecules. Sarah, we'll call you Sarah. That is important.
Well, I mean, for example, I go to Burning Man. We throw all these parties all year round, and we eat a bunch of drugs and go wild in the fucking desert. What's the point? Where's it going?
Well, I mean, I have theories that I've written about that I think that like we're seeing like the evolution of kind of new neo-tribal living patterns that ultimately as the resources go bust, and we're those become kind of a template, and also even the idea of the way music structures community there, I think is really fascinating for how the future might evolve. And the fact that, when you're there, there's no money exchange, so you're experiencing a sharing economy, and it feels so natural, and the fact that you see how, a cultural situation can just be programmed with a set of rules, and if they're better rules, everybody immediately adapts and is much happier. And the fact that we see that when we're there, that this idea that there's a distinction between the individual and the collective is a false dualism. That actually, if the collective is proper, then the individual can be encouraged to individuate more, and that'll actually lead the collective to be more collectivized. So I think that's all part of what Burning Man is about. And I do see I tend to see things as like transition, like we're in some type of transitional phase, and then we can kind of pluck out what are kind of the melodies, in a way that are leading towards the next sequence.
Reggie, I was wondering if, curious, feel like sharing anything about your own formative psychedelic experiences and how they may have influenced your music?
I mean, they influenced me a lot. I mean, the first time that I did a psychedelic drug was it was LSD, and I think it was a microdot, and it was in Montana when I was probably about like 16 years old. But I just remember it being the most hilarious thing in the world. I remember it was like maybe 4 of us, and I was really nervous, and I didn't know what the fuck LSD was. And when it hit, we tried to go out of town to go camping. We made it about 2 miles, 3 miles outside of the edge of town, and in Montana, towns just end in an edge. It's just the edge. 2 miles, you're like in the darkness. But we're like, stop there, and we realize we're getting too high. We can't drive out there. And this is the moment that I remember the most is getting out of the car and jumping into the ditch on the side of the road, and it's just being lit by headlights. But I find this those construction bars that are like, orange and white, whatever stripe, but just the bar part, not the like little horsey part. And so I found that, and I brought it up, and I just stood in the middle of the road holding this thing up, and I was just like laughing my ass off, just holding this thing, going. I thought it was the most hilarious thing, but the reason why I bring that up is because that opened my eyes to how funny things are. Like, things are funny all the time. And even in, I've had several good friends go through tragedies, and my dad has died, and through that process, I've always kept with the humor, but compassionate humor. It's not making fun of things. It's just celebrating how goofy things really are from different angles, And so I think that's the thing that I learned. That's the thing that I learned. Music's the same way. Sometimes I just like to say things that are slightly wrong to people. So I'll always say good morning, like whether it's afternoon or evening. I always say good morning. And the interesting thing about that, it's fun to say because it's just stupid. It's just like, oh, you mean good afternoon? It's usually the response. But not all the time. Some people are just like, oh, good morning, and they just continue on. Even at night, it's like, good morning, good morning. Hey, wait. But just playing around, being playful in the world, and that can be either an outward expression or it can be just an inward observation. But reformatting your world constantly, like your relationship to it. I always think it's amazing that I can pick up a glass of water and drink it. I'm just like, it's so cool. My hand doesn't pass through it. The stuff that this is made of doesn't make the water leak, and I have this depth perception and motor control, and it just goes up to my mouth, and it's like it doesn't leak when it's going down, But those types of things.
So I guess speaking towards the collective consciousness shift and transformation, I don't really know a lot about this. I was wondering if you guys could maybe talk about the Age of Aquarius shift, or like the shift from the Age of Pisces into the Age of Aquarius, and how that's supposed to represent kind of stuff we're talking about in terms of, the collective consciousness actually taking place where we understand what we're thinking and kind of just live in more unity. Is that?
Yeah, Yogi Bhajan, who was the founder of Kundalini Yoga, he was once asked by a bunch of his disciples, what's going to be the true meaning of the Age of Aquarius? And his answer was, no more bullshit. Which always seemed to be almost unimaginable,
Smell like mints.
Yogi Bhajan, Kundalini Yoga. But yeah, that's the theory, is it'll be a unity consciousness experience, at some point.
Is it happening over a span of years? Or
these ages are like 2,300 years each, so it takes a while to settle into a new one, to shift, yeah, so we're in that shift, apparently.
What art is just the craft of observation and expression. With you were saying co-creation earlier. It's like it's a co-creation, with the forces of chaos and your need to find some type of order or lack thereof. But I think that art is the kind of the key element to seeing things differently constantly, so that you're essentially time traveling from moment to moment. You feel like. I tend to do this. Like, as I'm walking down the street, I go, oh, it's 1965. And it's like, or I'll walk through a doorway and I'll be like, oh, it's Holland, just for a second, or like someone, does some weird body gesture as they're picking up a coin. And I'm like, oh, it's Poland. It's an old woman. It's cold outside. And she's getting that coin. But like, like you can literally see the world in so many amazing ways at any given moment. And it's the greatest gift that we have, the ability to see, to have perspective. It's the thing that people talk about when under the gruesome circumstances of torture, the things that save them. It's their ability to see the whole picture and to feel something more inside of every micro moment. And that's what I tend to look at it. And then in that way, the world it's infinite. And it's funny, and it's a good time.
And I guess what I was going to say is, like, what I had to do was learn to be like kind of impervious to being attacked, because I got a lot of negative comments from mainstream, like Rolling Stone and New York Times and so on. And then that becomes kind of like you always feel it, if you get attacked or if something seems totally like a reviewer is just like a swindling, what you're doing or whatever. But if you can, if you can use it to strengthen your resolve to kind of like find your own truth and hold your authenticity, then I think that helps. And then maybe also just having like ridiculous willpower, and that's something that you can actually train yourself to do. And most people give up way too soon.
Why do you guys think negativity is so sexy? What's so attractive? What's so habit forming? What's so addicting about negativity?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's necessary. I mean, negative energy is a necessary thing, and we are, I believe, binary individuals, and the binary is kind of the illusion in a way. And
like Carl Jung talks about how the wound is also the gift.
No.
Yeah.
And
Probably most people know that here, feel it to some extent.
It's why people who tend to be dark can be extremely joyful. They embrace an aspect of themselves, which is generally in Christian societies, puritanical societies, they push for this clean, positive extreme, sterile, and because of that, it takes so much energy to keep it there. It's like the pendulum wants to swing, but they just keep holding it up, and the mass is building. The more that they hold on, the more that it creates, and eventually it will break. That's the way all systems work. But I think that it's sexy in a healthy way. It's not sexy when it's a feedback loop. It's like if you shift the loop and create a spiral in everything that you do, you can dance around the properties of extreme negativity or extreme positivity.
I think it's also a programming. It's like a cultural programming that it affects people on a deep psychological level. So it's kind of like you look at if somebody is abused, then in a sense that becomes like attractive to them because that represents a form of attention. So I think that if you look at the idea of the yin yang or whatever, we've been in the black with a little dot of the white. There's the potential to go to the white with a little dot of the black. It's not like you don't want to eradicate negativity because I do think to a certain extent the wound is the gift, but the negativity and the aggression and the violence could move to like much subtler dimensions of being. Not explicitly played out in depleted uranium, killing hundreds of thousands of kids in the Middle East and all this crap. But that's why the shadow has to be kind of recognized and integrated from the Jungian perspective. But at the moment we have to figure out how deep that psychological programming towards negativity is, individually, and then do the work on ourselves. Then we can actually help others to resonate, at that more positive thing, I guess.
I say for me, I just like to notice language. I like to notice while I'm reading. I like to notice the way people are speaking. And through imitation, sometimes you can kind of come into phase with the knowledge that is generally gained by going through a structure, And so for me, mimicry enabled my ability to have a slightly expanded vocabulary because I was just mimicking. I wasn't even paying attention to the words necessarily. I was just saying things that sounded like, they're going somewhere with a pre-localized aesthetic that gets us closer to a place where we can all come to a congruous agreement, perhaps, pro-linear or anti. It's up to you. But you know what I mean? But just noticing language, like reading it and like listening to the cadence of language, the way that people say, the texture of their voices, all of those things are about communication because as we communicate, some people speak in a very monotone kind of a way, and after a while it just kind of starts to drown out. But when it's dynamic and you can bring it down to different levels and raise the intensity and so forth, those are helpful things. I'm just saying, notice the way people speak, because that's everything. I mean, every way of being and communicating is around you at all times.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that, I recommend listening. Yeah. Because actually, I tend to listen more than I talk, and I think that's really most people are confused by that, because everybody has wants to express their own little thing all the time, but actually, if you'll just sit and witness somebody, iterating their existence and their story, you learn so much, and you take that in, and then you can. It's a gift to listen.
I just am super grateful for you guys getting together and coming tonight and like talking to us about what's going on with you, because it seems like that it's done, it's over. It doesn't matter if like what the hell happens on 2012. If you're with people you love and you're doing what you like should be doing, it doesn't matter. And anyway, I wanted to thank you guys for coming and just like letting your minds